it's John from Heroes and Legends, and we have more Hour of Devastation previews to go over today, and we have some more good cards. This is really shaping out to be a really nice set. Yesterday's batch of previews were incredible. If you didn't see that video, check it out. There was just like one home run after another after another. A lot of cards I was personally very excited about. We got some good ones today. I mean, I can't promise today will top yesterday. Yesterday was pretty amazing, but we got some good ones here. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support us. One of which is our Amazon affiliate store. Any purchases you make there, a small percentage will come back to help us out. Secondly, you'll also find a link to our Patreon page below too. With that out of the way, let's get into the cards. We're going to start off with some Planeswalker exclusive cards from the Planeswalker decks. Now, if you're not familiar with those products, every time there's a new set release, it comes out with 2 Planeswalker decks. Within those decks, there's an exclusive Planeswalker that you can't find in Hour of Devastation, and there's also going to be 4 other cards in each deck that are exclusive just to those decks. Now, technically, they are standard legal, but they are usually purposely designed to not really truly be competitive. They're really meant for new players to pick up these decks, learn to play the game, just have some casual pickup games, that type of thing. Maybe the cards will translate at times into commander decks, casual fun commander decks, or kitchen table magic, stuff like that. So that's what we're going to look at first, beginning with the 4 cards from the Bolo Stack. Now, earlier in the week, and last week, we looked at the 2 Planeswalkers, so we won't look at those today, but if you're interested in my thoughts on those, definitely check out the playlist. But let's start off with the rare that's in the Bolas deck, Visage of Bolas. This costs 4, it's an artifact, and when this enters the battlefield, you may search your library and or graveyard for a card named Nicobolus the Deceiver. Reveal it and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle it, and then it will tap for one of the 3 Grixis colors. So I like mana rocks, and I like things that let me search up a Planeswalker, but do keep in mind this only lets you search for the Planeswalker that comes with this deck. You can't search for any Nicobolus Planeswalker, so you can't go back and get the older one or something like that in Commander, for example. But still, you know what? For 4 mana, this plays as a very fine casual card. These cards are really trying to get the Planeswalker into play in these decks, because that's really the fun part of these decks. So it's really going to serve its purpose, and it also serves its purpose after it's done that by giving you a little bit of mana ramp. I do like the card for what it is. Next we have Wasp of the Bitter End, and this one costs a black and 1, 2/1 insect horror. This is considered an uncommon with flying, and whenever you cast a Bolas Planeswalker, this could be anyone, then you may sacrifice this, and if you do, destroy target creature. Again, just fine. I mean, it's a 2/1 flyer for black. Sometimes it's hard to find 2/1 flyers for black that don't have some kind of drawback or something like that. So, kind of is what it is, a fine casual card. Zealot of the God Pharaoh, a red and 3 Minotaur Archer. This one's considered a common for 3. And its ability is, if you pay a red and 4, it will do 2 damage to target opponent. Okay, that's pretty high for 2 damage to target opponent, but sometimes the mana sink is just fine. You have something to do with mana that you maybe wouldn't have done anything with if you didn't have this card, and so be it. But again, another just fine casual card. And finally, you get a reprint of Cinder Barons. But I'll tell you what I like about this. They gave you new art that reflects Hour of Devastation, and you even get a Bolas quote in there. So at least they didn't just reprint the card and throw it in here. I think that's pretty cool. All right, let's look at the 4 Nissa cards. We have Nissa's Encouragement, a green and 4 sorcery, rare. Search your library and graveyard for a card named Forest, a card named Brambleweft Behemoth, and a card named Nissa Genesis Mage. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So really fulfilling the same purpose from the card we saw in the previous deck. It's hoping to let you get that Nissa into play quicker so that the games are just more fun between these decks. Avid Reclaimer, this is an uncommon, a green and 2 human druid 3/2. It's a mana dork. It taps for either green or blue, and if you happen to control a Nissa Planeswalker, you get to gain 2 life as well. I like mana dorks. Now, 3 mana dorks aren't going to really cut it in standard, but if this was 2 mana, I would probably look at this card a little bit differently. Brambleweft Behemoth, and this one costs 2 green and 4, and it's a 6/6 trampler. Again, great in casual magic. Sit down at the kitchen table with a 6/6 trampler for 6, that can do some work for you. And finally, Woodland Stream. Again, they didn't just reprint it, they gave us some new art that looks really sharp actually, and you get a Nissa quote on there too. So I do like the flavor and what they're doing with those cards. Alright, with those out of the way, let's move on to the actual true Hour of Devastation proper cards that you'll find in packs. We'll begin with Angel of Condemnation. This costs 2 white and 2. It's a rare angel. Flying Vigilance 3/3. It's got 2 abilities. A white and 2. Tap, exile another target creature. Return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next untap step. Or pay a white and 2. Tap, exert it, and then you get to exile another target creature until this leaves the battlefield. So kind of like a Fiend Hunter type effect, something like that. So, the card's doing a lot. I mean, there's a lot happening here. It's a tad mana intensive, maybe, and also that exert cost is going to be kind of slow, but it is doing a lot for 4 mana. Even just a Flying Vigilance 3/3 for 4 isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, and then you can also flicker stuff and maybe even exile stuff, at least temporarily with it. I like the card. I was trying to think of where I could imagine this seeing play in Standard, and I actually kind of had a hard time with that. Now, the meta is about to shift again, so maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. But my main issue I've had with the card when it comes to Standard playability is there's just so many other good choices out there when you start getting to the 4 or even 5 to drop spots in decks. I mean, I'm thinking about like Glorybringer, for example. For 5 mana, Glorybringer coming in with haste just can do a lot of work, and this is much, much slower than a card like that. So that's my main concern. Now, granted, if I'm not in a red deck, if I'm playing maybe a white weenie or like white humans or something like that, I have Always Watching, then this comes in maybe as a 4/4. That starts to feel a little bit better, because the 3 toughness also worries me a little bit. We saw the 3 casting cost Lightning Bolt a few days ago. I mean, it's not a phenomenal card in the way Lightning Bolt or even Lightning Strike were, but it's still a card that's out there. And yes, I mean, all creatures die to removal. I don't want to get too deep into that, but at the same time, I do get a little nervous when I see 3 toughness creatures, especially ones that I want to preserve. Like in this case, if I'm putting my resources into exiling a bunch of stuff that my opponent has, then I really don't want this thing to die, because I really put myself back when it goes away, right? So it becomes a super risky endeavor at that point, and you could have some serious diminishing returns if this thing gets wiped out. So that makes me a little nervous about this card. Aside from that, though, there is some good raw power here, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it show up in some form in Standard, at least during its lifespan, if not right away. Now, beyond that, this is easily first pickable in Draft. This thing's a bomb in limited games like Sealed or Draft. I'd be really happy to play this card. Awesome there for sure. Inesh, Creo-Sphinx, Sovereign. 2 blue and 4, legendary creature Sphinx. It's a mythic 4/4 flying, and Sphinx spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Whenever this or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So you get a mini Factor Fiction there, which is great for card advantage, and as well as even populating your graveyard at times, depending on what you're trying to do. So I like the card a lot. I mean, it does a whole bunch of stuff for sure. Now, 6 casting cost in Standard, I think is going to be a little too steep for this card. There are other cards out there that cost 6. I'm thinking of the God we saw yesterday, for example. I mean, that costs 6. Granted, you have to have a red thrown in there, but it costs 6, and it is incredible. So I just think that cards like this are going to have a hard time competing when you have cards like the one we saw yesterday out there in the format. We're in a really weird spot right now, though. The format is huge. This is like the biggest Standard is going to be for quite some time. So there's just a lot of options out there, which makes some really good cards maybe fall by the wayside, at least temporarily, to post-rotation. I think this is one of those cards. Now, we haven't seen the rest of the set. Maybe they're going to give us a whole bunch of really cool cheap Sphinxes or something like that. And if that's the case, all of a sudden, who knows what could happen, right? But at least for right now, I think this is a bomb in limited, first pickable in Draft, great to open and sealed. But on top of that, too, awesome for anyone who's trying to make a Sphinx tribal deck, either casual or maybe even a commander deck, who knows? I just think that that could be really fun, because there are some powerful Sphinxes out there when you look back into Magic's past. Alright, let's move on to Hour of Glory. This is a black and 3 instant rare. Exile target creature. If that creature was a god, its controller reveals his or her hand and exiles all cards from it with the same name as that creature. So my thoughts on this one is it's fine removal for limited. It's actually great limited removal. Really happy to play something like this. Exiling can be real important to deal with Indestructible, to deal with like the new gods that keep coming back from the graveyard, stuff like that. So you're going to be really happy at times to have an exile spell on hand. Now, when you start thinking about Standard, typical, just regular removal that's out there now, there are cheaper options. The only way I see this really crossing over into standard is if somehow, some way, there's a deck that really starts using a lot of gods. Like, for example, we see that third god, and it makes it very possible to make like a tri-god deck, almost like a Godtron, if you will, or something like that. Because they do appear like they're trying to make them work together. Now, casting cost wise, I don't know how realistic that would be, but we still have a lot more of the set to see. So I'm going kind of deep here, but if that deck became a thing, then you'll be happy to sideboard this in to deal with a deck like that. But I'm glad it exists. We probably won't need it, but I'm glad it exists. Alright, this next card comes to us from a Japanese language spoiler, and it's Reason to Live, at least loosely translated at this point. The first side costs 1 blue, it's a sorcery, lets you scry 3. The second part costs 4 and a green, it's a sorcery with Aftermath. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. So, first thing when you look at this, more free spells. What is going on, especially with blue and green and free spells lately? Well, sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, Marvel was very, very powerful, and there weren't enough answers at the time in the format to deal with it, at least on a consistent enough basis that Wizards felt comfortable keeping it in the format. Now, I could probably do a whole other video whether that was true or not, but for our purposes today, we'll say that's the case. Now, as far as free spells go, this is okay. Like, the thing is, it doesn't dig really deep. It's only letting you see the next 3 cards with the scry, and that's even assuming that you're able to set something up and cast the second side fast enough for the scry to matter. Now, hopefully, that's what you're trying to do with this card, right? Even for 6 mana, for example, you're scrying 3 and then putting that creature on top to put it into the battlefield. That's the optimal way to use this card. But you know what? Scrying 3 on its own sometimes just isn't bad either. So where does this card fit in ultimately? Again, I don't really see it crossing over into standard. Again, unless there's some other cards out there that are really supporting this, make it easy to manipulate your deck, that type of thing. And I don't really see enough of that currently, but there's still a lot more cards to go, so I won't count it out completely yet. Now, in Limited, again, I'm happy to play this in Limited just for the scry effect. And if I happen to maybe get lucky at some point and get another card out of it, or even possibly get a creature, then wonderful. But scrying for 3 for 1 mana, even if it is sorcery speed, actually feels pretty good to me in Limited. I don't know if I'd first pick that, but it could be a high to middle of the pack pick for me. So it's a good Limited card, and again, I don't really see it in Standard, but I want to see the rest of the set first. Next we have a split card that's actually pretty competitively costed. Driven to Despair, green and 1, sorcery, of course this is a rare. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Despair, 1 black and 1 sorcery with Aftermath. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So if someone read that card to me and didn't tell me the casting cost, I'd probably guess 2 green and 1, and maybe 2 black and 2, something like that. But it's a lot cheaper than I would have guessed, as you can see. I feel like this is very competitively costed and really pushed, at least cost-wise. And, I mean, we've seen Golgari colors have done really well in the format in the past. We've seen fantastic decks in those colors. So, why not now? There's definitely a lot of tools out there. And this is a really cheap way to get damage across, perhaps draw some spells, maybe make your opponent discard the rest of their hand later in the game. It's actually very, very interesting to me. I could see this seeing Standard play relatively easily, actually, and maybe numerous different style of decks even. So yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this card. I think this is another really big hit for them. Again, in Limited, it's going to be fantastic for you there too. You have a lot of creatures in Limited. A card like this really helps them get a little bit extra, and I do like that. Next we have a Chinese simplified language preview, and it's a rare. It's Hostile Desert. It's a land desert. You can tap for colorless mana, or you can pay 2, exile a land card from your graveyard, and this will become a 3/4 elemental creature till end of turn and still a land. Now, there are cards out there in the format that do allow you to kind of mill yourself or throw a land in your graveyard here and there. Is that consistent enough to warrant me running this, and especially giving up my potential for a strong color base in my deck in Standard? I don't know. I kind of feel like the answer to that is no. This feels a little too risky. I don't want to dilute my mana base too much. especially considering you don't want to stumble on a color in this particular standard format. It's just too fast and too rough to do so right now. So that worries me a little bit. I mean, it's cool when you can get it to happen. I thought to myself, maybe what about Modern? I mean, you have fetch lands there. It's really easy to get fetch lands into your graveyard. And yeah, that could be cool. But again, the problem being, is that fast enough for the world of Modern? And I really don't think it is. Because not only do you have to exile that fetch land, but now you still have to pay 2 mana, which is cutting into your turn. And alright, you get a 3/4 elemental creature. But there's also a lot of good land creatures out there that exist in Modern that just feel better than this one to me. So, I don't know. This one isn't super exciting for me when it comes to World of Constructed. Depending on what cards are around it, it could be playable in your limited build. I mean, just be careful, again, about your color requirements of your deck. If you're really trying to go hard with maybe a third color or something like that, perhaps you count this actually as one of your spells and not one of your lands. And then it could be okay. But again, you do have to have ways to trigger it. And not every pool in Drafter Sealed is going to have that. So in that case, it doesn't become really that useful. So I don't know. I feel like if I see the rest of the set, I can tell you how viable this could be in a draft more so. But at this point, I'm not real high on this one. Having said that, those are the cards for today. We got some good ones there today, especially like that second split card we looked at. And I'm really excited about what's to come the rest of the week and next week. I really want to see that third god. The first two have looked incredible. I'm really excited about them. Really want to see how they all play together. That's got me excited. So the set in general, really shaping up to look pretty nice. I'm really impressed so far. And we're going to find out more tomorrow, and we'll be back again to talk about those cards. So until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.